Over the past 30 years, video games have evolved into some of the most well-designed and captivating mediums. In that time, developers have used those which came before it as an inspiration to build upon their own creation. But few can hold the title of being an original source of that innovation. Blossoming an entirely new genre of gameplay and design was Metroid. Released all the way back on the Famicom in 1986, and 1 year later on the NES, Metroid was Nintendo's answer for their missing action game. Titles like Mario had mastered the craft of platforming, and The Legend of Zelda opened up a massive world. But what Metroid sought to do was take elements from these games and combine them into a sci-fi action title. By taking on Mario's platforming and Link's large collection of ability-driven combat, Metroid designed a shooting game which completely broke free of many platformers at the time, and had the player move in a completely opposite direction than they were used to: left. Metroid wasn't just about finding upgrades and progressing towards the right side of the screen. Backtracking through areas previously inaccessible was revolutionary and innovative to its overall design. Metroid and the likes of Castlevania effectively birthed the Metroidvania. But Nintendo was not only groundbreaking in the design and advancements of their titles at the time, they were also responsible for delivering us with one of the first, and still to this day, most iconic female protagonists to ever grace the gaming world: Samus Aran. Unlike many franchises today, Metroid falls into a unique category in regards to its timeline. The story often isn't a heavy focus in the grand scheme of things, dedicating most of its time and effort into the raw map and gameplay design. Though unlike some of its other Nintendo compatriots, Metroid does in fact have a linear story. While told through the perspective of a mostly silent protagonist, Samus's story is far from as simple as many would assume. So I thought it was time I go through and give you the complete, unabridged timeline of Metroid. The entire setting of Metroid takes place within the Milky Way galaxy. However, unlike the universe we live in, this one is much more explored. Different planets, intelligent species, and civilizations exist and interact with each other. Since it takes place in an unspecified future, it uses the cosmic calendar to keep track of time, so any dates listed aren't meant to be confused with the Gregorian calendar which we use. Since the galaxy is made up of so many different planets that are capable of interacting with each other, a primary sovereign government was formed. In the year 2003 of the cosmic calendar, representatives and delegates from many of the civilized worlds came together and established an intergalactic congress known as the Galactic Federation. Under their governance, the galaxy entered a golden age of peace and prosperity. Trade prospered with thousands of ships ferrying goods between planets across the galaxy. Such tranquility, however, doesn't last forever, as there are always those looking to disrupt the peace. Space pirates function as an antagonistic faction to the Federation and would serve as the main enemies for many of the games. They're a group of vicious and cold-hearted marauders who would raid vessels for their supplies and also lay claim to many planets. They would kill and take over the natives of the world, capturing the land as their territory if they saw fit, and enslaving its remaining survivors. Due to the threat they posed, the Federation established the Galactic Federation Police as a direct response to deal with the space pirates. Anyone associated with the pirates were ordered to be arrested immediately. However, due to the vastness of space and innate mystery behind their faction, it was actually incredibly difficult to track them down. Because of this, the police eventually turned to hiring bounty hunters, independent contractors hired on a per-job basis. However, this was done on very rare occasions. Anyway, with that setup, we can get to the actual plot. One of the first and most important events in the timeline is revealed to us in the Metroid graphic novel. As the galaxy was entering into its prosperous period, the space pirates made a move that could not be ignored. Everything takes place on the planet of K2L, an Earth colony which was responsible for the mining and distribution of a floraltite, a crystal which was used to fuel the ignition modules of spaceships. As such, it is a very valuable source to many. It also has incredibly dangerous and flammable properties prone to explosion when ignited. The mining colony was run by Rodney Aaron, a very determined and noble hard worker. He was married to his wife, Virginia Aaron, and the two had a young 3-year-old daughter named Samus Aaron. One day, the planet was visited by the Chozo, an incredibly intelligent and ancient bird-like species, hoping to obtain some of the colony's afluorotite for their own uses. Attempts at negotiations were made with Rodney, however, they were respectfully declined. The planet already has arrangements with the Galactic Federation, who monitors everything, making sure the crystals don't fall into the wrong hands. While the Chozo don't seem dangerous, they are incapable of just giving them some of the minerals. So unfortunately, their trip was all for nothing. While Rodney and the Chozo were having these discussions, Samus wound up befriending one of them known as Old Bird. Their interaction is brief, but he certainly tries his best to instill kindness into her. When a rabbit squirrel snatched her backpack and refused to give it back, he taught her to try and make friends with it to appear non-hostile. She does so by naming the animal Pianchi, and he becomes her new pet. But after it was made clear that they couldn't obtain any afluorotite, the Chozo peacefully left the planet. But problems quickly arose after their departure, as they had been followed by space pirates. The group was led by Ridley, a military general with a brutal disposition, foul temper, and love for death and destruction. He may have the appearance of nothing more than a normal dragon, but he's incredibly intelligent and a brilliant battle tactician. After learning K2L had abundant amounts of afluorotite and was supplying it to the Federation, he saw it the perfect target to raid for resources and deal a massive blow to the organization. The planet was caught off guard, but managed to send out a distress signal to the Federation police. However, this would be frivolous. Per Ridley's orders, everyone on the planet was to be killed. A merciless and gruesome onslaught ensued, and all the helpless colonists could do was succumb to the terror as they were slaughtered. As for Samus, she was fortunately in the forest playing with Pianchi when everything occurred. She felt the force of the blast and knew something was potentially wrong, however, due to her age, couldn't grasp the weight of the situation. When she began making her way back to the colony, she wound up coming face to face with Ridley. Being but a naive little girl, Samus, similar to what she had done twice that day, already making friends with Old Bird and Pianchi, attempted to befriend the bloodlusting general despite her fear of his appearance. However, it would not go as peacefully as the last. Despite feeling initial pity towards the young child, Ridley swiftly makes an attempt on her life. But Samus is saved by her mother, who arrives just in time to push her out of the way and save her life, but is killed by Ridley's blast in the process. The shockwave pushes Samus back while Ridley takes to the skies to continue terrorizing and murdering the rest of the survivors. Meanwhile, with Samus's father, while this was all happening, the space pirates successfully managed to pillage the afluorotite onto their ship. Being a very brave and honorable leader, Rodney had snuck aboard, seeing the danger the space pirates could pose if they were able to use the minerals. But while in the right heart to want to stop them, he didn't have any weapons, and the truth of the matter was he couldn't take them down even if he tried. The Federation wasn't going to be able to arrive in time to stop them, so in his mind he was left with only one option to ensure they didn't escape with the cargo. And that was to sacrifice his own life by detonating the afluorotite. While he is deeply sorry to Virginia as well as Samus for what he's about to do, he's always believed in helping the greater good, and so expresses his love to his family before triggering a massive, cataclysmic explosion. The explosion was actually so devastating that it caught Ridley by surprise when he was flying around, and the wreckage from his own ships injured him and tore its way through his body that he was almost killed. He fell back to the planet on the brink of death, but at this point, everything was already gone. The people were killed. There were no survivors. As for Ridley, he only managed to survive his injuries by consuming the flesh of the deceased humans and regrowing his own cells. When the dust settled, Samus was the only remaining survivor of the planet K2L. The same group of Chozo who accidentally led the space pirates to the planet returned after hearing their distress signal. They arrived only to find Samus as the sole survivor. Understandably, they felt regret, but most importantly, responsible for the fate of K2L. If they had never decided to visit, then everyone would still be alive. But nothing could be done to mend the past. All they could do was assist Samus as she had lost everything. Old Bird took it upon himself to take custody of the young girl, and so she was taken to their home planet of Zebes. Zebes was originally a colony for the Chozo, which I feel now is an appropriate time to elaborate on them as a whole, as they have a profound impact on what's to come. The Chozo have been around for a long time, at least 1500 years before the events of the series. They possess the most advanced technology in the galaxy, and once had admirable combat prowess as well. Throughout their time, they shared their knowledge, wisdom, technology, and culture to many different races throughout the cosmos. They colonized several worlds and left behind many relics for others to discover. But the biggest problem the Chozo faced was their own extinction. They have extraordinarily long lifespans, and because of this, their old age wrought havoc on their ability to reproduce. And so, the Chozo became a dying species, soon to become extinct. Along with this, their technology they felt reached a point where it could no longer advance further. And so, the decision was made to withdraw from the galaxy and become more peaceful, akin to observers and scientists. Not every Chozo followed this path, however, as there are two known Chozo tribes to exist within the larger narrative. The Toha tribe were the main tribe, and were the peace-loving and benevolent ones who took a step away from their warrior past. The Makin tribe are about the complete opposite. They are led by Ravenbeak and reside on the planet of ZDR, another planet the Chozo inhabit, and are much more willing to take up arms and go to battle. Despite this, both tribes are still in good faith with one another. For the most part, this part of the story is going to focus more on the Toha tribe. Considering the Chozo were explorers always eager to uncover new planets and the life which it held, the optimism that came with this discovery was only bound to yield a horrific sight. The Chozo uncovered the planet SR-388, and an incredibly dangerous organism which resided there. The creature was able to assimilate both the DNA and knowledge of other life forms. They take on the host's memories, appearance, abilities, everything about them, and sucks them dry. Their only drive seems to be to consume and reproduce, which made them a threat to the entire cosmos. They were dubbed the X-Parasite. The Chozo saw it their duty to use their knowledge and technology to completely eradicate the species. And so they genetically engineered their own organism to take out and combat the X-Parasite, known as Metroids. The term Metroid in the Chozo language roughly translates to Ultimate Warrior. It's capable of raw energy absorption. To put it simply, they were the perfect predators to eradicate the X-Parasite. It's the reason the Chozo went to planet K2L in the first place. The reason they wanted the Effloraltite was to use it to help in the Metroids' creation. It is also important to note another very important creation of the Chozo, and that's Mother Brain. It's an incredibly intelligent AI that functions much like a supercomputer. She oversees the planet's technological functions, archives information and historical data, and performs an extremely wide range of complex operations and algorithms of unimaginable magnitude. Her goal and purpose the Chozo created her for was to help achieve true order in the galaxy. Anyway, with that setup, we can finally return to Samus, who was taken to Zebes after being the sole survivor of K2L. Taking a child, let alone a human one, to Zebes for many may as well be a death sentence. The environment, flora, and fauna were much too dangerous for most species to live with. It's partially why the Chozo chose this planet to begin with. The natural dangers present deter any of those who might try to come to the planet with hostile intent. Because of this, even Mother Brain objected to the idea of keeping Samus around, believing that she would die in a matter of days. However, looking over her was something they felt they had to do. The concerns were valid, however. Samus would have a very difficult time living on Zebes as a mere human, so they needed to figure out a way that would assist her natural development and adaptation like the Chozo could. And that's where inspiration struck. If the Chozo were able to adapt to the environment in a way humans couldn't, then they should give Samus Chozo DNA. It would give her the same adaptability to the environment as the rest of them, and her odds of survival would go up exponentially. Fortunately, the Chozo are geniuses in the field of technology, so that's exactly what they did. Two known Chozo were responsible for donating their blood. First was Grey Voice of the peaceful Toha tribe. He was the one who found Samus on K2L and felt responsible to look after her. The second was Ravenbeak of the warrior Makin tribe. It can only be assumed that from the beginning they wanted Samus to possess more than just the ability to survive on the planet, but to be able to fight just like their greatest warriors. And so their DNA was spliced with hers. Samus's blood adapted, and she was forever changed. Now able to survive the dangers of Zebes, Samus would grow up here. From the get-go, she showed signs of a fighting spirit to live. Similar to the Metroid, the Chozo wound up seeing Samus as having great and limitless potential for the sake of good. While the Metroids were meant to be the ultimate warrior, Samus was meant to be a true warrior. As such, the Chozo trained her how to fight and handle combat. For many years, she would train her physical abilities, helped greatly thanks to the Makin DNA in her. By the age of 14, she was already stronger, faster, and more agile than any ordinary human. She was even gifted her very own power suit, yet again another advanced Chozo creation, which improved nearly all aspects of her offensive and defensive capabilities. For the most part, Samus appeared to be on her way to becoming a true warrior in the eyes of the Chozo. But there was a moment which caused them hesitation. Samus would exhibit a trait which they believed a warrior could not have: compassion. After stumbling upon a species on Zebes known as the Ionospheria, Samus had a childlike awe at these butterfly-like creatures that looked like small bears. They appear incredibly innocent, and that's because they are. All they do is absorb liquid and use it to fly. But these creatures actually wound up being poisoned by badger clovers, an alien flower used by the space pirates to infect and control other animals. And so these cute little creatures all of a sudden became machine gun wielding enemies trying to assassinate the lives of the Chozo. Samus, seeing the species as victims, manages to destroy their weapons without harming a single creature. However, Mother Brain immediately incinerates them to ensure nothing else gets infected. Something that truly enrages Samus. While pissed, there was nothing she could do. This opened the eyes of the likes of Oldbird, seeing that they can no longer assist Samus on her journey. The Chozo are supposed to be the protectors of the galaxy, however, they've delegated nearly everything to be done by Mother Brain nowadays. The title of Protectors of the Galaxy doesn't much fit them anymore, and so they've decided to pass that title on to Samus. She's got the drive and passion to protect, she's got the power which they've given her, but now she needs to discipline and master her heart. They cannot assist her with that, and it is something that she must do on her own. Oldbird and everyone who has looked over and raised her for the past 10 years have instilled all they could hope for in her, but now it was time to walk a separate path. And so Samus left Zebes, embracing their belief in her and the title of Protector of the Galaxy. To become the warrior and figure the Chozo wanted her to be, Samus saw it most fitting to do so through more official methods, and so she joined the Federation Police Force. Despite being a young teenager, only around the age of 14 at the time, Samus excelled in the academy. She was quickly promoted to the Star Trackers unit, an elite force that only 1 in a million officers are qualified for. She took orders from a man named Chief Hardy and was squad mates with Kreetz, an elfin soldier, and Mach, a very physically strong simian. One of Samus's missions involved the human planet of Jagrod. It was taken over by space pirates who enslaved its people and began using them as a workforce. It was the job of Samus and her team to simply report the goings-ons of what they were doing. But that plan was pushed to the wayside when a space pirate intended on executing a young girl who was deemed unfit to work. Samus, not willing to simply sit around while someone is killed, jumped into the horde of space pirates to protect the girl, and understandably, an all-out firefight broke out. Fortunately, thanks to the talents of Samus as well as her team, they were all completely wiped out, save for their leader. He was brought in for questioning, and the man who would do so was someone who was very important to the timeline, General Adam Malkovich. This would mark his very first interaction in witnessing the capabilities of Samus, and it wouldn't be the last. He interrogates the space pirate, and it reveals only one truth. The planet of Jagrod was only a decoy to distract the Federation, while the space pirates' main forces were sent to take over Zebes. It's not inherently the planet itself the space pirates wanted control over, rather the technology on it. Considering the Chozo have lived there for so long, there are invaluable pieces of advanced technology there for the taking. They'd made attempts in the past to seize control of the planet, however were unsuccessful thanks to the assistance of the Federation. Hence why this time they were distracting them with a decoy. Upon learning that the planet was in danger, Samus was quick to act as she knew the planet better than any Federation soldier could. Adam Malkovich, seeing her determination, gave her 48 hours to do what she wanted and rescue those she could before the Federation arrived to take action themselves. Her fellow comrades Mach and Kreitz joined her as well. The Chozo were in a particularly tough situation. The space pirates had arrived and successfully imprisoned all of the Chozo there. But there was also the new arising issue of Mother Brain. Being a self-learning AI, she came to believe she surpassed the knowledge of her creators and was frustrated with their lack of action in bringing peace to the galaxy. Because of that, she became more than willing to abandon them altogether for a new path that she was in charge of forging. Don't forget, her ultimate goal and purpose the Chozo designed her for was to figure out ways to help achieve order in the galaxy. The problem was, she now intended to do so through blood and fire. What Mother Brain figured was if she took control of the space pirates, she could use them to start a war with the Federation, inevitably weakening both sides to a state of vulnerability. From there, she would step in and snuff them all out, killing everyone in the galaxy, resetting everything to zero. It was the only way to bring true order. Taking over the space pirates wasn't that difficult, as being relatively simple creatures, they acknowledged true power. Those with strength are those who lead, and Mother Brain exhibited copious amounts of strength. So everyone quickly began obeying her orders. One Chozo, however, was quick to recognize the threat that was developing and adapted. Grey Voice. Instead of standing against Mother Brain and being taken captive like the others, he chose to stand by her side purely as a bluff. He would feign being an ally, and when she wasn't expecting it, he would attempt to destroy her. But for now, he had to bide his time. As Samus and the others set foot on Zebes, they uncover a message left behind by Old Bird detailing the status of the planet and what was likely the fate of those who would remain. He states how they were forced to simply hand over the planet to the space pirates, and the best course of action now was to simply try and flee. However, various prisoners were taken hostage. At the same time, the Metroid they had created was released and is being manipulated, so it poses a danger to everyone as well. Unfortunately, their hopes at making an ultimate warrior failed, so he says how Samus is their only remaining hope. Upon learning this, the team decided to split up into two. Samus would try and make her way to Mother Brain and use her to break the deadlock, while the others locate and rescue the hostages. Samus's destination was Zebes' Torian, where the Chozo and Mother Brain always held council. By the time she arrived, the area was flooded with space pirates, fearing that she was already too late. However, when she took up arms ready to attack, she was stopped by Grey Voice. Understandably taken aback by what's going on, it is here Mother Brain unveils her entire plan and betrayal in front of Samus. Seeing the Chozo as relics of the past who have been surpassed by their own creation, Mother Brain intends on leading a new army full of youthful strength to a galactic unified society. Of course, through extinction. And she wants Samus to join her. In a way, Mother Brain sees herself as Samus's true mother. She believes the Chozo only ever cared for her because they were trying to turn her into a weapon. And since she was responsible for creating Samus's power suit, she, in essence, gave birth to her, and it is her true destiny to stand by her side and usher in a new era of history. However, despite these psychological tactics, Samus knows deep down in her heart who her parents really were. Rodney, Virginia, and all of the Chozo who genuinely cared for her throughout her life. Mother Brain only sees things through an objective lens, failing to understand or comprehend the emotions of others. While Samus passionately rejects Mother Brain, unleashing a barrage of attacks on her chamber, they prove ineffective, and she doesn't even leave a scratch. While that didn't faze her, what did was Ridley. Having come face to face for the first time since the events on K2L, Samus is confronted by the monster who took everything from her. But despite all of her training, everything she's accomplished to fight against this exact situation so others wouldn't have to go through what she did as a kid, Samus is too overwhelmed by her past. She can't help but shut down. She doesn't fight, she doesn't act, she doesn't do anything. It is only thanks to Grey Voice, who was given general rank by Mother Brain, who demands Ridley spare her life as he has plans for her. The other members of Samus's squad fortunately manage to locate everyone and create a distraction, pulling away most of the space pirates, giving them time to rescue the prisoners and Samus, whose trauma is only worsening. She goes from frozen to a full-blown panic attack, pleading with her team to kill her right then and there. That there is no hope against Ridley, and that he is an inevitable fate that will kill everyone. The others, of course, do not comply with Samus's plea, instead rushing to evacuate the planet as the time limit Adam had given them is running out. Samus is forced to battle her inner demons in a literal sense. She's been bottling up her emotions this entire time, how she was feeling, what she was going through, that it all exploded the moment she was faced with Ridley. She was scared and alone, but could never admit it. But while she's had that sense of loneliness, in reality she's gained a family. The Chozo who raised her and trained her are what calm her heart. They are proud of everything that she's been able to do and what she's persevered through. She lets out her emotions one last time before finally composing herself and recognizing her duty to protect. Unfortunately, time has run out. The Federation is arriving and they cannot stay on Zebes any longer. This is only a problem because Grey Voice has stayed behind to attempt to destroy Mother Brain. But despite everything in Samus telling her to rescue someone who's been nothing but a father figure to her, if the others want any chance of surviving an escape, they need Samus there. So all she can do is endure. The confrontation between Grey Voice and Mother Brain doesn't go as desired, despite Grey Voice's best attempt, even donning some warrior Chozo armor they've since hung up, as well as brandishing an ancient weapon. Its effects are useless against Mother Brain, and to make a bad situation worse, Ridley shows up to defend her. He strikes a fatal blow to Grey Voice, but as a last act and Ridley's insistence on playing with his prey, Grey Voice is able to take out a space pirate ship in the sky, allowing for Samus and the others to escape before Ridley blasts him, taking his life. The Federation arrives and destroys the space pirates' flagship, rescuing the likes of Samus and her platoon, but what follows is unclear. Some sources say that the Federation drive the space pirates away from Zebes and or arrest the ones still remaining. However, considering what we know in the future, the space pirates begin using Zebes as their main base of operations in the first Metroid, which we've yet to reach. So either the Federation temporarily got rid of the current space pirates only for new ones in the future to take their spot, or the Federation simply left Zebes alone after taking down their flagship. Both are kind of peculiar and don't smoothly fit in with the larger picture as a whole. One piece of the story that might explain this inconsistency is that the Galactic Federation disregarded Zebes as a low priority. But then again, with the Federation and space pirates already there and the information about Mother Brain, it's strange that the planet would be shooed away as a small problem. Regardless, what does wind up happening is Mother Brain reinforcing Zebes' defenses, making it even harder for those who want to come to the planet to even try. For the time being, she would use this planet as a homeworld to build up her army of space pirates. After her infiltration of Zebes, Samus, now around the age of 16, was transferred to a new unit, this time under the direct command of Adam Malkovich himself. As we would learn of these events through Metroid Other M, this title made some creative changes from where we left off. Firstly, Samus appears much younger than she did in the manga despite being a few years older. Her maturity level also seems to have been dialed back a lot. The manga left her feeling very mature, understanding her responsibility to the universe. She was a capable soldier who began to find her footing. But now, Samus is a very defiant new recruit. Her relatively young age seems to shine through in her more obstinate attitude. She still follows orders as she's told and respects the chain of command, but it does come with a little bit of an edge. She's treated a lot more like a child and acts like a child and doesn't nearly have the same respect as her previous squad. But probably her biggest change would be her relation to Adam Malkovich. The game has a heavy emphasis on their importance to each other, specifically in the way he understands her. The game chooses to opt out of any and all mention of the Chozo and Samus's time on Zebes with them. Instead, here Adam serves as her surrogate father figure, as he knows all about her tragedy on K2L. Samus's rebellious nature here is pushed on because it gives her the feeling of parental bonding, knowing she won't get in trouble for how she acts. The game also does what no other in the series has or will do, and that's call attention to Samus's gender. More of her attitude is also pushed on to her feeling like she has something to prove because she was the only woman. For the most part, fans collectively acknowledge the narrative faults and inconsistencies of this title, but still include it in the series' timeline, however, try to take as little as possible from it. There are a few notable squad mates we should get to know as well. Anthony Higgs was someone who was very amused by Samus's personality and nicknamed her Princess, as she was the only woman in the unit. There is also Ian Malkovich, Adam's younger brother. While he's a character with very little story, from the artwork we can see a bit of his and Samus's relationship. It wasn't romantic, but he appeared to be a very outgoing and lively figure, while Samus was the opposite. It's likely because of the two stark contrast, they still got along quite well. However, the part of the story that Ian's involved in would hold major repercussions. On a rescue mission to save passengers of the ship Lusitania, Ian was sent to make repairs on its drive unit when it went critical. Seeing no other option, Adam ordered they detach the unit and Ian along with it. Despite Samus's pleas that they could save him, the risk was too great and could cost everyone on the ship their lives. So he had to make the hard call to sacrifice his own brother. This was an event that Samus would regret acting the way she did, as it made Adam's decision to sacrifice his own brother more difficult. Giving someone hope in a moment of true despair only winds up making the despair that much more painful. This event was the catalyst for Samus completely choosing to walk away from the Galactic Federation police. She hung up her badge and abandoned the Force, stating that she was too young and relatively inexperienced, and because of that, she set down on a path that she herself could only forge: a bounty hunter. Samus would completely vanish from the public's eye for a few years, honing her skills, arsenal, and mentality to the point where she became one of the galaxy's greatest bounty hunters. She resurfaced during the inauguration of Chairman Keaton, a Congress member of the Federation, as an assassination attempt was about to be made on him, and she was there to stop it. Fortunately, no one is harmed, and Samus is back, better than ever. In the time of Samus's disappearance, many events had developed with the space pirates. For the sake of simplicity and cohesiveness, I'm going to keep much of the details limited for now, as a handful of the characters and plot points wouldn't be relevant until we reach the events of Metroid 2, much further down the timeline. So instead of having to keep track and remember all of the characters as they come up, I'll save you the hassle for when they're relevant. What you need to know is that there was actually another group of Chozo on the planet SR388, where they initially discovered the X-Parasite, who stayed behind and tried to colonize it. They were working together with those on Zebes to create the Metroids as well, and they made one of their very own. The only difference is that while Zebes only created one Metroid, the Chozo on SR388 repeated the process and created a whole army of Metroids, which were used to effectively wipe out the majority of the X-Parasite on SR388. Things, however, went wrong, which I'll specify later, and when the Galactic Federation uncovered the planet, The Metroids were rampant, and much like how the Chozo saw the X-Parasite as a danger, the Galactic Federation saw the Metroids as a danger, as it had wiped out nearly all of the life on the planet. So, in an attempt to study them, research teams captured various Metroids from the planet. The situation was made unimaginably worse as space pirates raided the research vessel and claimed the Metroids for themselves. It was a dream come true for them, a bioweapon immune to most forms of weaponry, the ability to leech life from its victims, and they even learned how to breed them. By exposing the Metroids to beta rays, they would multiply at an exceedingly fast rate. The space pirates effectively gained their own bioweapon to conquer the galaxy. The Galactic Federation made many attempts at tracking them down and snuffing out the threat, however, were unsuccessful. As mentioned previously, the space pirates were hunkered down on Zebes. But thanks to Mother Brain, the planet's defenses were airtight and the Federation was always pushed back. And so, as a last resort, the Federation turned to one of the greatest bounty hunters in the galaxy, who had a reputation for completing numerous missions others thought impossible: Samus Aran. Samus's mission on Zebes is what would be the events of the original Metroid for the NES. However, in 2004, a remake was made for the Game Boy Advance designed to retell the first game to more appropriately fit in with the story's canon. The game was aptly titled Metroid Zero Mission. After being briefed on her job as well as a brief reunion between her and Adam, the mission was ready to go. Adam and his forces would distract Ridley and his pirate fleet from space, while Samus dropped down to the planet and attempted to stop Mother Brain. It didn't take long for her to notice how different the ecosystem was from when she was a child. So much of the wildlife and species were significantly more hostile and purposeful in their targeting of Samus, as Mother Brain had influenced them. As Samus ventured through the tombs and underground passageways of the old Chozo ruins, she uncovered various artifacts left behind which enhanced her power suit, respectively amplifying her offensive attack and mobility. When she finally ventured into the lower depths of Brinstar, the underground caverns of Zebes, she encountered one of two pirate leaders situated on the planet, Kraid. This large, three-eyed reptilian serves as much of the backbone and muscle for the space pirates' fleet. Though, after a ferocious battle with our fierce bounty hunter, Kraid is defeated and Samus continues on her mission further into the depths of the planet. It was inevitable that word would eventually reach Ridley of what was going on Zebes. And so, with Samus causing a ruckus, Ridley abandons his firefight with the Federation and descends to the planet to defend Mother Brain, only to yet again be met face to face with Samus. This time around, things are different. Samus is no longer the same naive little girl she was when they first met, nor is she the traumatized soldier who froze up in the heat of the moment. She's prepared herself not only physically this time, but mentally to exact revenge on the monster who's done nothing but take away those she's ever cared about. This time around, Samus doesn't freeze and uses everything she's ever learned to take down Ridley and defeat him. While an insurmountable personal achievement for Samus, it was not what she was hired to do, and so she set her sights for Mother Brain. During her travels, she comes across a grisly sight. Corpses of deceased space pirates littered the area. The culprit were the Metroids. The space pirates had underestimated the species' intelligence, and they were quick to break out of containment and drain the life out of each and every one of them. As she was protected by her facility, Mother Brain continued the cloning, making it an even more hazardous trek for Samus. Eventually, she made her way to Mother Brain's chamber, and the two clashed in an arduous duel, with Mother Brain being the one who was ultimately defeated. Her loss came with a failsafe, as the entire facility was set to explode. Samus promptly made her escape and back to her ship, where it seemed like the mission was a resounding success. Mother Brain was stopped, the Metroids on Zebes were all eradicated, and she finally put an end to her lifelong rival, Ridley. But what should have been a celebratory moment was cut short as her ship was shot down by the surrounding space pirates still in Zebes' orbit. Her ship crash-landed back on the planet's surface, and to make a bad situation worse, her power suit was destroyed in the crash. She was left with only her Zero Suit and stun pistol as her only means of defense. She figured the only way to escape the planet now was by stealing the space pirates' mothership. Not the wisest plan, but quite frankly, she was given no other option. Despite her best attempts at stealthily sneaking past all of the patrolling guards, she was inevitably spotted and forced to retreat into the nearby ruins of Chozodia, the location where many Chozo rituals and ceremonies were held. Samus uncovered one of the sacred ruin tests that Old Bird had brought her to when she was a child. Here, she is forced to face the spirit of the mural, which holds a mirrored image of Samus herself. You see, Samus's connection to her original power suit wasn't akin to the likes of normal armor. For her to remain connected, it required an unfathomable amount of mental energy ordinary people can't imagine. The mural pushes Samus into a level of uncomfort. Put under pressure, she has nothing but herself to rely on. And it is only thanks to her strong force of will that she can successfully complete the trial and integrate with the legendary power suit. Stronger than ever, she yet again storms the space pirate's mothership, leaving many corpses in her wake. When she eventually reached the bridge of the ship, she was met by the Ridley robot, a giant robot Ridley had constructed built in his own likeness. While it stood in her way for a brief moment, Samus had no qualms in its destruction, which yet again set off another self-destruct sequence, only this time for the mothership. Samus's escape came from hijacking one of its escape pods, which jettisoned her out to space as the mothership and all of those aboard exploded in the distance. Samus's Zero mission could officially be declared accomplished. While certainly a feat to celebrate, not everything was wrapped up in a tidy bow. Despite all of their defeats and the self-destruction of the space pirates' base, the likes of Mother Brain, Ridley, and even Kraid survived, though they were certainly in rough conditions. But for now, their existence wouldn't register as a thought in Samus's mind for the time being. For now, she is off to new jobs as her life as a bounty hunter wasn't over. Metroid's story for the time being would take a slight detour with the Prime series. Samus's story is easily separated into two larger arcs, easily differentiated by their 2D and 3D design. Prime is her 3D story arc. Canonically, this line of games does fit into the timeline after Samus's Zero mission, however, doesn't exactly continue the narrative that was already being told. It introduces many new concepts and lore elements that can largely be seen as self-contained. Both story arcs aren't required to understand the other, so her 2D journey would be put on pause for the time being. So, what is Metroid Prime all about? Well, after Samus's Zero mission and eradication of Metroids on the planet, unfortunately, as would become a common trend, it was not actually the last of them. On Zebes, yes, all of the Metroids were gone, but the space pirates had a research station orbiting the planet and had actually collected Metroid samples while they were there. After Samus's mission, they stealthily snuck back onto the planet and recovered Ridley's beaten and battered body and promptly escaped unnoticed. It was aboard this ship they managed to save Ridley's life by converting him into a cyborg. His synthetic parts were all largely replaced for shiny new robot ones. This new and improved version of him would be known as Meta Ridley. Upon leaving Zebes, the space pirates began searching for a new source of power or weapon they could utilize. And that's when they came across a planet known as Talon 4. A huge energy reading was emitting from the planet, and so they went to investigate and claim it for themselves. What they found was an old Chozo planet long since abandoned and died out. You see, what had happened in history's past was a group of Chozo from the planet Elysia came to Talon 4 in hopes to regain their spirituality. They wanted to abandon their technology and instead rely on the planet's resources. While it did work for some time, disaster eventually struck. A large meteor-like object known as the Leviathan struck the planet, and with it came a poison named Phazon. It is a highly radioactive substance which has extreme mutagenic and energy-producing properties. They come from the planet Phase with the goal to infect and corrupt other planets, thus spreading Phazon across the galaxy. As such, the Chozo of Talon 4 were forced to respond. As the entire ecosystem around them died, they built a temple around the impact crater in order to contain the brunt of the poison. While the temple was successfully built, the Phazon still managed to drive many of them mad, and small portions of it still leaked into the planet. The Chozo eventually wasted away, leaving behind specters of their former selves. Any other survivors eventually fled to an unknown location. But, you see, all of this was foretold to them in a prophecy before any of this happened. They were told that their adopted world would become infested by a great evil and eventually die, unless it was saved by the Entrusted One. With only a small glimmer of hope to push them, they ensured a method to unlock the seal they placed around the Leviathan so their defender could have access to it. But also left behind were power suit modules to help on their journey. With all they could do finished, they eventually died. Fast forward to the present and we're back to the space pirates uncovering the planet and the remnants left behind. They found out that the source of the energy readings they were getting was the Phazon, and so began experimenting with it. They largely attempted to utilize it by enhancing bioweapons. They captured much of the wildlife still on the planet and used them for testing, which largely resulted in the test experiment's death, but with a small portion mutating. Eventually, they began to understand Phazon a little more, enough to the point where they started using it on themselves and their soldiers to create even stronger, elite space pirates. Seeing its use, they wanted the source of it all, which they found at the impact crater, but thanks to the Chozo's seal, they couldn't reach the bioform dwelling within. Intelligently, they began researching the Chozo, hoping that their relics could break the seal. They actually wound up retrieving some of their relics left behind, or just destroying them. Their efforts wound up being pointless as they were unable to translate the hints left behind. Needless to say, they also tried using Phazon on the Metroids. But it should be noted that one Metroid actually managed to bypass the seal left behind by the Chozo by phasing through it. Once inside, it began feeding on the Leviathan's Phazon. It mutated rapidly and drastically until it became a Metroid Prime. But having evolved, it was now stuck under the seal. Anyway, after a few years of the space pirates doing this, things eventually went wrong when two parasite queens they were testing on broke out of containment and began wreaking havoc throughout their spacecraft. Most of their crew either fled or were killed on board. The ship was wrecked inoperable and automatically sent out a distress signal. This SOS was picked up by Samus, having spent the past 3 years following her Zero mission, tracking down space pirates and the like, building up her reputation. Her journey eventually led to Talon 4 answering the space pirates' distress signal. Upon boarding the ship, she was met with a largely barren spacecraft. Her investigation of the facility did lead to her encountering one of the parasite queens, which, when defeated, wound up crashing the whole ship down onto the planet. As she was escaping, however, she did come into contact with Meta Ridley. While I had detailed earlier that the space pirate saved his life by turning him into a cyborg, that quite frankly took place over a long period of time. It is likely that only just now had he reached the point of full recovery, explaining why he was left behind on the ship while the other space pirates abandoned the facility hours earlier. Anyway, now awoken, he made his way down to the planet. Samus, of course, was able to escape on her ship and safely touch down on Talon 4 as well. While investigating, she would uncover and learn all about the Chozo's past here and the space pirates' experimentation. Through her past knowledge and experience, she deciphers all of the clues the Chozo left behind and uncovers the artifacts they left to break the seal. Along with the wildlife and such posing dangers, she did also face the space pirates who were never evacuated, specifically the genetically engineered ones. The one most notably relevant here would be the Omega Pirate. Samus would encounter and subsequently defeat this one, but in an unforeseen development, its corpse collapsed on top of her and began disintegrating. The Phazon within the space pirate virtually corrupted Samus's power suit and changed it. No ill effects were suffered, instead the complete opposite. Her suit changed into what would be known as her Phazon suit, and now she was immune to the Phazon corrupting the planet. With all of the artifacts obtained, she went to the impact crater to unlock the seal, but before she had the chance, Ridley came swooping in and destroyed the Chozo totems, preventing her access. She was forced to battle him, but unlike their previous encounters, this one was hardly meaningful. He was just an obstacle that stood in her way, and thus she moved him. Meta Ridley was defeated, and even the Chozo statues fired beams at him because of what he did to the totems. He would fall off a ledge, followed by an explosion, but would survive. With this, Chozo ghosts appeared and permitted Samus access below, where she encountered the Metroid Prime. Without much talking to be had, the two fought fiercely, with Samus having the advantage thanks to her new Phazon suit. She was inevitably the victor, but in the monster's death, the Prime grabbed onto her and absorbed her Phazon suit along with a small portion of her DNA before exploding. Samus evacuated before the altar's destruction, having ended the plague that was corrupting Talon 4. The planet was then able to heal itself, with all traces of Phazon being disintegrated. But within the remains of the Metroid Prime, a new being was born known as Dark Samus. It's the reincarnation of the Metroid Prime and is a being of Phazon able to take on the form of Samus thanks to her suit and DNA it absorbed. Due to being a creature of Phazon, it seeks to absorb and spread Phazon throughout the galaxy, and that's exactly what it intended to do. For now, Samus's adventure would take her on yet another side story in Metroid Prime Hunters. For this title, we are introduced yet again to all sorts of new lore, this time fairly self-contained to this one entry alone. To understand this story, what you need to know is that a powerful and malevolent being known as Gorilla had invaded the Tetra Galaxy millennia ago. The being originated as a biomorphic vapor, but then mimicked the cellular structure of a race residing there known as Alimbics. Gorilla then began decimating the Alimbic race on every planet they inhabited. It was causing utter chaos. Fortunately, the Alimbics are one of the most technologically advanced species out there, and so used their technology to build a prison and various other means to stop him. Thanks to the Seal Sphere, they were able to ensnare the being with their psychic powers and immobilize it. They built a prison ship specifically designed to contain him, and used something else they made called the Alimbic Cannon to send the ship into another dimension. But all of this came at the ultimate cost. Everything combined used all of the Alimbic psionic energy and thus caused the race's abrupt extinction. It was a decision that they were fully aware of and made consciously. Fast forward to modern day, and we reach the plot of the game. Gorilla, after an undetermined amount of time, is able to telepathically breach the dimensional barrier and send a message to various intelligent species with a promise of ultimate power. That the secret to ultimate power resides in the Alimbic cluster. This catches the attention of many bounty hunters, all with a variety of different goals and motives. Some are incredibly selfish and hope to claim the power for themselves. Others are much more noble and hope to help other people. But the message was also picked up by the Galactic Federation. Seeing how this ultimate power might not be a good thing to let fall into anyone's hands, they wanted to make sure it didn't get into the wrong hands. The problem was the Alimbic cluster is in the Tetra Galaxy, which is outside of their jurisdiction. So to get around this, they hired Samus to uncover more about this mysterious message. Samus, along with 6 other bounty hunters, are the participants in Gorilla's plan. He instructs them all to collect 8 octoliths scattered across various worlds. All of the bounty hunters fight for control of them, which, as you should expect by now, eventually all end up in the hands of Samus. With them, she is able to activate the Alimbic Cannon, which allows the prison ship Gorilla was being held in to re-enter the dimension. The actual purpose of the octoliths was to summon the ship. Despite having technically lost this fake goose chase they were being used for, the other bounty hunters make their way to the ship hoping to find the ultimate power. What they do find is instead Gorilla, who assimilates their powers and begins using them for his own. The only way Samus is able to defeat the monster is by using the Omega Cannon, a forbidden weapon the Alimbics created and feared for its unstable power. With it, Gorilla was obliterated and his ship fell apart in a series of explosions. Samus and all of the other bounty hunters were able to escape in their own relative ships. Samus is psychically thanked by the long-dead Olympics as she flies off into the distance. Like I said, that title is fairly self-contained. With that little side story said and done, we must return back to the story of Phazon. Metroid Prime 2 echoes back to much of what happened in the first game, but scaled to a larger story. Just like what happened to Talon 4, a Leviathan meteor impacted the planet of Aether and began spreading Phazon. But unlike Talon 4, Aether had a fragile and unique existence. The planet emitted light energy, and it was sufficient enough to sustain all kinds of life on the planet. But thanks to the mutagenic and poisonous qualities of Phazon, and more particularly the Leviathan, which carries it, which is able to open up wormholes, which is how it travels to so many different planets, that mixture and impacting of the two forces tore a rift through time and space. An alternate dimension was created to serve as the complete opposite to Aether's light world, the Dark Aether. Beings of darkness were born, known as the Ing. Aether was already devastated and suffering the effects of Phazon. The inhabitants of the planet, known as the Luminoth, were forced to fend off the Ing, which began making their way to their dimension in hopes of corrupting it too. A 50-year-long war then broke out between the Luminoth and Ing. Unfortunately, this war of attrition only worked in favor of the Ing, as the Luminoth were driven to near extinction. The very few who were left exiled themselves and went into hibernation, hoping to either die peacefully or be saved by some miracle. And a miracle they would not get just yet. What they did receive were space pirates. Not only did they find and attempt to pillage Talon 4 for its Phazon resources, they also did the same for Aether as well. Considering it was within Federation jurisdiction, they set up a stealth shield to remain hidden. Yet again, they uncovered a lot of what the planet had to offer, including its alternate dimension. Having uncovered the Dark Beam, they figured out how to travel to the Dark Aether and harvest Phazon from there. But this process would be incredibly slow as the atmosphere was poisonous. While a base had been set up there, they did encounter an unforeseen complication and interference in the form of Dark Samus. Having been born of the Metroid Prime at the end of the first game, Dark Samus's desire to absorb Phazon eventually led her to Aether as well. With such a simple motive, there's not much to detail about what it did. But Dark Samus did wind up screwing over the space pirates in a major way. Occasionally, it raided their bases in order to obtain the Phazon they had collected. During one of her raids, she destroyed their stealth generator, which allowed the Federation to locate and intercept them. A chase between the Federation and space pirates ensued, with the space pirates' frigate being crippled and eventually crashing. This was almost the end of their ventures on Aether, but fate seemed to shine upon them, as the Marines' ship suffered a malfunction due to the stormy interdimensional atmosphere of the planet, and they wound up crash landing on the surface. While the Federation survivors tried their best to scout out the location, they were repeatedly assaulted by the dark splinters of the planet and were all killed. But before they all died, one soldier was able to send out a distress signal, hoping that someone would stop what was going on here. That signal was picked up by Samus. Conjointly, the Federation also reached out to Samus at the same time, hoping that she would investigate their missing men. Samus took the job and made her way to Aether, where similarly, her ship was also caught in the planet storm and badly damaged. Unfortunately, she was too late. The soldiers were all killed, but unexpectedly she was attacked by their reanimated corpses. After fleeing to safety, she has a run-in with Dark Samus. Obviously recognizing the uncanny resemblance to herself, she was in disbelief and fairly confused over what she was looking at. Once it fled into the Dark Aether, Samus followed it there, where she was exposed to the alternate dimension. After being unexpectedly ambushed by the Ing, she was forced to retreat back to the normal world, only to learn that many of her suit upgrades had been robbed from her. After finding the gunship she was hired to track down with no survivors in sight, she decided to continue investigating with the hope of recovering her stolen weaponry. What she wound up finding was Umos, one of the few Luminoths who didn't cryogenically freeze themselves as he was looking over them. Here, he informs Samus all about the planet's past and alternate dimension. He tells her about their battle to control the planet's light energy. The Ing had stolen many of the components needed to control the energy, and so Samus agreed to help him and restore light to the Luminoth. Her mission took her all across the planet and the different dimensions. She faced many Ing, restoring much of the weaponry she lost, and even had a few clashes with Dark Samus. She had even obtained the Dark Suit, a power suit created by the Luminoth to better withstand the poisonous environment of the Dark Aether. Once she had gathered 3 energy controllers to transfer the Light of Aether, she was rewarded with the Light Suit, a power suit which contains the Light of Aether itself, designed to fight the Ing. The final energy controller resided in the Sky Temple. Being her final destination, it was fittingly the most dangerous place of all. Here resided the Emperor Ing, a behemoth which rules over and controls the entire Ing race. But such a reputation doesn't sway our fearless bounty hunter, as she took the monster on head first. While almost defeated, Samus always prevails. The Emperor is defeated and the last of the planetary energy is collected. Without it, the Dark Aether begins to collapse and Samus tries to make her iconic escape, but before she can, she is interrupted by Dark Samus for one last duel to the death. Notably, Dark Samus's body has changed due to the overabundance of Phazon it has consumed. Being a Metroid Prime, all of Samus's past clashes with it were actually frivolous, as it only ever had one weakness, a weakness she already exploited back on Talon 4, and that was Phazon. While it sought to consume Phazon, consuming too much of it, especially in one go, was damaging to itself. So Samus absorbed its Phazon into her charge beam and shot it back. The attack penetrated Dark Samus's shield, forcing it to destabilize just like it had in the past. In its moments of defeat, just like before, the being tried to grab onto Samus once more to absorb her light suit, but failed and dematerialized into a cloud of Phazon. Samus escaped the Dark Aether as it collapsed behind her and returned to a warm welcome from the Luminoth. Having awoken from their cryo chambers, the people of Aether were free to rejuvenate their world back to its flourishing state. Samus was thanked as a hero. She returned the equipment she had borrowed and returned to her gunship and flew off into space, as the life of a bounty hunter is never over. With Aether saved, the Galactic Federation came to check on the planet to ensure its well-being. While here, they did manage to procure some Phazon samples, but unbeknownst to them, there was much more that was already being pillaged. The space pirates, while they had suffered near defeat and practically all that were present during the events had died, a small portion had survived. Their battleship, known as the Colossus, came to stealthily retrieve most of the Phazon left behind and escape without ever being noticed. What the space pirates didn't plan on is what exactly was in the remains of what they had gathered. Dark Samus's molecular state was amongst all of the Phazon they had stolen. Before they ever had the chance to do anything with the Phazon, Dark Samus absorbed all of it to re-energize herself to an even more powerful state. Considering she was never on their side, she wiped out 1/3 of the entire battleship's crew. But before it wiped them all out, it had the realization that it could use them, specifically as an army. So it used its Phazon energy to brainwash the remaining survivors into being accepted as their new leader. Also, based on how space pirates tend to operate, her power in doing so would have made most of the others follow her anyway. The brainwashing more so ensured their undying allegiance. Anyone who disagreed or showed signs of hesitancy were promptly killed. From here, Dark Samus formulated its master plan. So far, it's been going around finding planets that have already been corrupted by Phazon and working from there. But things would be far more effective if it had control of where everything was coming from. So its plan was to track down the planet where Phazon originates, Phase. Dark Samus left the space pirates for several months, and by using one of the Leviathans used to poison the planets, it was able to use its energy and reverse locate where it originated. And she eventually found planet Phase. She then used the Leviathan to open up a wormhole and bring her army of space pirates to its location. But despite having found the source of all Phazon, the planet is only capable of producing one Leviathan every 100 years, a natural cycle which was much too slow for galactic conquest. Fortunately, the space pirates, and I'll be honest, I don't quite know how this is possible, had inside agents within the Galactic Federation. Using them, they were able to become aware of their Aurora units. They are organic supercomputers originally meant to assist and interface with Federation ships. It was the perfect catalyst to control Phase. Phase, I should also detail, is considered a sentient planet as it is alive and gives birth and grows the Leviathan. As such, Dark Samus had the space pirates raid a Federation battleship and steal its Aurora unit. Being organic, the Phazon corrupted the supercomputer. As planned, the Aurora unit became symbiotically linked with the planet. Dark Samus had gained control over Phase. Now she could systematically and strategically launch and corrupt specific planets. Also, considering that all Aurora units are connected, she used hers to spread a virus to the Federation's other supercomputers. Anyway, Dark Samus's invasion started with the space pirates' homeworld. While the battleship she had control of and the people on it were nice to have, a planet and its people is still a planet with vastly more potential soldiers. So, unbeknownst to those on the planet, the space pirates' homeworld was corrupted with a Leviathan. Some actually did try to fight against it, but ultimately failed. Any remaining space pirates were then brainwashed as well. It should also be important to note that Ridley is one of them. Having survived his defeat and explosion on Talon 4, he wound up being one of the many space pirates bowing to Dark Samus's rule. Afterwards, 3 planets were specifically targeted due to their importance to the Galactic Federation. Brio is where they got the bulk of their fuel gel. Without fuel, they can't go anywhere. Elysia was the Chozo homeworld where the inhabitants of Talon 4 originated before they moved to the planet. It contained Skytown, a research facility built 1500 years ago that could monitor deep space. The Federation had an agreement with them that allowed them to use their research. And finally was Norion, which housed a massive military base. All of them were targeted to weaken and immobilize the Galactic Federation. While Brio and Elysia would get corrupted by Leviathans and Phazon, Norion was a different story, because Samus was involved. With 6 months having passed since she saved Aether, the Galactic Federation had hired her along with 3 other bounty hunters to administer cures to their infected Aurora units. They had inevitably become aware that the space pirates had managed to spread a virus throughout their systems and so created a vaccine to fix them. So she, Rundis, Gandreda, and Gore were hired to split up and cure them. But while they were all here, space pirates launched an attack on the facility, disabling their planetary cannon and working as a diversion so the Leviathan could crash into the planet. All of the bounty hunters split up, working to restore the generators powering the cannon. When Samus went to activate the final one, she would yet again have a run-in with Ridley. As they plummeted down a 1600-meter shaft, it was a scrappy and chaotic duel. But when Samus ended their fight, she was saved by Rundis, who flew her to the final generator. Together, all 4 bounty hunters made their way to the control room to blast the Leviathan. But before they ever had the opportunity, Dark Samus appeared before them and blasted them with Phazon. Right then and there, Dark Samus had infected all 4 of them, their bodies now self-producing Phazon within. With seemingly all 4 of them knocked unconscious, Dark Samus saw her job done and left. But in actuality, Samus was still awake, though in rough condition. She mustered what strength she had and fired the planet's cannon, destroying the incoming Leviathan, saving Norion from becoming infected. Shortly after, she passed out and went into a coma for 1 month. Within that time, the Galactic Federation had analyzed the 4 bounty hunters' bodies and uncovered that they were self-producing Phazon. As a method of venting it from their system, the medics equipped them with Phazon enhancement devices, which allowed them to harness their own Phazon to power their suits and become even stronger. The other bounty hunters woke up within a week of being unconscious, and each of them were dispatched to the respective planets Dark Samus had infected. But you see, unbeknownst to the Galactic Federation, the enhancement devices they were equipped with was tricky to master. It was a delicate balance for the hunters to utilize, control, and maintain their levels of Phazon. Incorrectly doing so would result in the user succumbing to Phazon and becoming corrupted. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to all 3 of the other bounty hunters. The Galactic Federation lost contact with them within a week and had no idea what happened, and thus they were forced to rely on Samus. Being the final bounty hunter to awaken, it was up to her to find out what happened to her recent but close squad mates. The story of Samus's mission across all 3 planets are largely the same. She'd arrive and encounter each of her former bounty hunter partners, only to learn that they had been corrupted. She is forced to face each of them in battle, with all of their respective fates resulting in death. Dark Samus appears during the defeat of each and every one of them as she kills and absorbs them, while all Samus could do is watch on in anger and grief. On all 3 planets, Samus is capable of destroying the Leviathans, poisoning their worlds with Phazon. But on the Space Pirates' homeworld, she did have yet another run-in with Ridley. Now known as Omega Ridley, he has since regenerated parts of his organic body and become infused with Phazon. While stronger, Samus is still able to defeat him as he disappears into a cloud of Phazon. He obviously escaped and would return later. Anyway, after dealing with the Space Pirates' homeworld, all of the current Leviathans had been destroyed. But it came at a cost. Samus had become corrupted, where she was now visibly glowing with Phazon energy. She needed to move, and she needed to move fast. Fortunately, the Space Pirates were in command of the Leviathan battleship. The Leviathan Dark Samus had used to find the planet Phase was repurposed and retooled by the Space Pirates into its own organic ship. Samus gained access to this ship, and with it she was able to open up a wormhole which took her straight to Phase. She, alongside the Galactic Federation, were able to launch a full frontal assault against Dark Samus and the Space Pirates. It was obvious she needed to be the one who stopped everything, and so the Galactic Federation busied the Space Pirates from the sky as Samus descended to the planet. Upon touching down, she inadvertently absorbed a dangerous amount of Phazon, which almost completely corrupted her, like her fellow bounty hunters. Even despite venting as much of her available energy tanks as possible, it was clear that she was now living on borrowed time. She made her way to the planet's inner sanctum, where she would have her final showdown with Dark Samus. Despite its best efforts, our fearless bounty hunter would emerge victorious, but before being permanently killed, it chooses to fuse with the planet's Aurora unit as a last-ditch effort. After an arduous 2-part battle, Samus is able to destroy the corrupted Aurora unit and put a stop to it and Dark Samus once and for all. But things didn't end so smoothly just yet. Considering the Aurora unit was linked to be part of the planet, destroying it meant destroying the planet. The destruction of Phase was inevitable. The Galactic Federation used yet another wormhole to escape, and just in the nick of time, Samus too was able to escape the planet's destruction. Without Phase, all traces of Phazon in the universe disappeared, including the one inside her body. She was back to a healthy condition. Her mission was completed, and the Federation celebrated her success. But she had much to feel mournful about. She would lament over the loss of her fellow bounty hunters. Eventually, she left and headed off in space to find her next mission. But in an event that has yet to be established, a mysterious spacecraft was following her. While her Prime journey for this timeline would come to a close, the production of Metroid Prime 4 could continue this saga in who knows what point in time. With the Prime series wrapped up, we can return to the story of Mother Brain and the Metroid, so to speak. While Dark Samus had taken control of a significant number of space pirates, Mother Brain was still in command of a healthy portion of them. Ridley had regenerated most of his organic body parts and returned to her command. Like I said earlier, I hope you haven't gotten lost with the inclusion of the Prime series in the midst of the other main narrative the series is telling. So certain things you might need a refresher on and go back in the video and skip over the Prime games so the narrative remains flowing and easier to understand. But if you remember everything about the Metroids and so on, then let's continue. Earlier in the timeline, I mentioned the events that kicked off Samus' Zero mission, how the space pirates raided a Federation vessel full of Metroids, but I didn't go into much detail about where all of these Metroids came from and how they took over the planet of SR388. So here are the details of what happened. While there was one Metroid present on Zebes, perhaps the very first Metroid to be created, they were also subsequently created on the planet of SR388. It is likely that both the Chozo of Zebes and SR-388 were working together, and they were both successful in the Metroids' creation in their respective fields. However, the presence of Metroids was much more substantial on SR-388. If you recall, the planet was the home of the X-Parasite, which led the Chozo to develop the Metroids to deal with them in the first place. Some of the Chozo, however, didn't leave the planet, instead opting to continue in its exploration and colonization. They set up base there with researchers from the Toha tribe, most notably one named Quiet Robe, and warriors of the Makin tribe, led by Ravenbeak, who gave Samus his DNA back on Zebes when she was a child. The Chozo here spent much of their time studying the X-Parasite, the effects it had on other organisms, and as mentioned, they created the Metroid. It didn't take long before they created their own army of them and unleashed them upon the X-Parasite. What would seem as a moment to celebrate, as the harmful parasite had seemed all but eradicated, was met with an unforeseen development. The Metroids began to undergo metamorphosis. The Chozo hadn't intended for the species to evolve past their larval state. In fact, they were so comfortable around them they were largely akin to house pets. But as they molted, the once tame creature became increasingly aggressive and hostile towards their creators. They began attacking them, trying to kill them, wiping out all species of life it could get its hands on. The Chozo were forced to act. They flooded the cave systems, which had become overrun with mutated Metroids, with a hazardous purple liquid, and implemented a seal system to ensure its species population didn't worsen. To gain access to the lower caves, Metroid's DNA was required to be entered into the seal, meaning they had to kill Metroids to encounter more, thus in a sense trying to keep a balance of its population. The Toha tribe was hoping for more extreme measures. They intended on destroying SR-388 entirely. Both the X-Parasite and now Metroids were major threats that could wipe out the galaxy, so they approached Ravenbeak and the Makin tribe asking for their assistance to do so. Ravenbeak was averse to such an action. Similar to Mother Brain, he sought to bring order to the galaxy, however, sought to do so through force. He respected power and dominance above all else, and he saw the Metroids as the perfect tool to help him in his galactic conquest. And so, he murdered the entire Toha tribe, leaving only Quiet Robe for his bioengineering intelligence and ability to control Metroids. Something like this was a normal act for him, to take the lives of those who didn't follow his orders, and his villainous tendencies wouldn't end here. For now, Ravenbeak and the rest of the Makin tribe retreated to the planet of ZDR, where the Makin tribe originated, and planned their next move to return for the Metroids. But, unbeknownst to them, they had an unregistered stowaway. Anyway, that is what happened to the planet of SR-388, why the X-Parasites are practically extinct, why the Chozo are all dead, and why the Metroids have seized control over the entire planet. Over the years, the Federation intended on harnessing the Metroids' power, however, had a change of heart. After what happened on Zebes with the space pirates, they were deemed too dangerous to even exist and made swift attempts to eradicate them as soon as possible. This proved harder than expected, as the various attempts they made resulted in only the death of their soldiers. And so, yet again, the Federation turned to the likes of Samus to get the job done. Considering her past experience battling against them, she proved to be yet again the perfect candidate for the job. Samus's adventures on SR-388 would be the events of Metroid 2 for the Game Boy, or its 2017 remake, Metroid Samus Returns. Regardless of which title you play, the story remains almost exactly the same. After touching down on the planet's surface, Samus uncovers that the Metroids have mutated, and she is forced to face the likes of the Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, and Omega Metroids littering the underbelly. Utilizing the seal left behind by the Chozo to drain the hazardous liquid containing them, Samus was met with the Metroid Queen. Even despite the Chozo's attempts at containing their population, evolution provided a mother. The Queen Metroid was single-handedly responsible for the Metroids' repopulation on the planet. In other words, if Samus kills the Queen, then there'll be nowhere else for the Metroids to spawn from. And even better, by the time she reached her, She was the last Metroid remaining. As such, Samus fought the oversized child bearer, emerging victorious, completely snuffing out the likes of all Metroids in the universe. At least, she thought so. After an arduous duel, Samus came across a single Metroid egg. From it emerged a baby Metroid. Upon hatching, the infant accidentally imprinted Samus as its mother and showed no signs of hostility. Similarly, Samus could see and sense the innocence of the Metroid. It had done nothing wrong and didn't seem like it would, so her more compassionate side went against the mission. She didn't destroy all the Metroids, instead opting to take the last one with her. During their escape, however, Samus is yet again interrupted by Ridley. Having shed most of his cybernetics he gained throughout the Prime trilogy, Ridley's original body seems to have regenerated most of its organic parts. Considering Samus is in possession of the last Metroid in existence, Ridley obviously wants his hands on it. Yet again, another battle between the two ensued, only this time it seemed like Ridley was gaining the upper hand. After throwing Samus against a wall and pinning her down, preparing to unleash a fire blast at her, the baby latched itself onto Ridley, absorbing enough energy to give to Samus and rejuvenate her back to fighting condition. Thanks to the collective teamwork, Ridley was defeated once more, and both her and the baby left the planet. The story transitions smoothly into the next title in the series, Super Metroid. Seeing the potential value the Metroids possess, Samus handed over the baby to the Ceres space colony for its scientists to research. As expected, they uncovered how the Metroids could be used for the better of mankind as they were always intended. DNA was extracted from it, and research was to continue on for closer study. Seeing the baby in safe hands, Samus left to continue her bounty hunting. But it didn't take long for things to go wrong yet again. Still serving as a thorn in her side, Ridley and his space pirates launched an attack on the facility, hoping to procure the baby. A distress signal was sent out, and Samus rushed back. What she was met with was an all too familiar trademark of Ridley. The entire colony was mercilessly slaughtered. There was nothing she could do to help the people anymore, so she rushed to check in on the safety of the Metroid. By the time she arrived at the containment center it was originally being held in, it was completely destroyed, with space pirate corpses at its base. A little further into the facility, she found it along with Ridley. Samus tried her best to wrangle the baby away from his treacherous claws, but was unsuccessful. Ridley escapes the base with a Metroid in hand, setting off a self-destruct sequence for the facility. Samus quickly makes her way back to her ship and follows his trail, which leads all the way back to Zebes. In the time since the space pirates' initial defeat, Ridley and Mother Brain had been working diligently to restore their forces and their base to working order. It may not be perfect, but they did manage to bring on at least 2 more generals. Of course, none of them were a match for the likes of Samus. Kraid, Phantoon, and Dragon were all defeated, allowing for Samus to have her penultimate and final duel with Ridley. The result was all the same since she's taken up the mantle of bounty hunter. Ridley is defeated, however, unlike all of the other occasions they've clashed, this time he is actually killed. What Samus finds is not the baby Metroid, but rather the cage that was containing it, broken. As she ventured further into the depths of the planet, she encountered cloned Metroids. The space pirates tried their best to replicate the bioengineering of the Chozo before them, however were massively unsuccessful. These clones were much easier to disperse, and Samus did so with ease. What did serve as an unusual anomaly was her encounter with an abnormally large Metroid. She tried her best to fight it off by any means necessary, but all of her weapons proved ineffective. The Metroid latched onto her and began sucking all of the energy from Samus and her suit, where at the last moment released its grip as it had recognized her. That's right, this Metroid was in fact the baby, now grown to an extreme size, likely thanks to the space pirates' attempt at tampering with it. But Samus didn't have time to worry about the baby at this exact moment. For now, the space pirates proved the greatest threat, and having done this dance already, Samus knew Mother Brain must be the one behind the whole thing, and so made her way towards her chamber, where there she was. Samus proceeded to destroy her chamber, but just when everything seemed finished, Mother Brain unveils her new robotic body. This fight proved vastly more challenging than when they first clashed. So much so that Samus winds up getting incapacitated with a powerful laser blast, leaving her near dead. But just as Mother Brain was about to finish her off, she is saved by the baby Metroid come to protect its mother. It latches onto Mother Brain, leeching the energy from her and quickly administers it to Samus. Unfortunately, Mother Brain was still alive and even more pissed than she was before. Her sights get set on the Metroid itself and blasts it with a powerful hyper beam, destroying it. The baby's death did not come in vain, as the power it transferred to Samus restored her to an even stronger, more powerful position than when she first arrived, and now she too could use Mother Brain's hyper beam energy. And she did. With her newfound strength and sacrifice from the Metroid, Mother Brain is killed once and for all. As seems to be a common trend, the death spurs on yet another self-destruct sequence, prompting Samus to make a hasty retreat. Unlike last time where only the space pirate's base was detonated, this time the entire planet is destroyed, putting an end to the Chozo civilization and history that once inhabited Zebes. But most importantly, it was yet another goodbye to one of Samus's childhood planets. Of course, it was not the planet itself that she cared about, as all of the important lessons and memories of those she cared about were still with her. Samus's mission was completed, but more importantly, the galaxy should have been on its way to an optimistic and peaceful future. With the destruction of Zebes, the space pirates were effectively wiped out and made extinct, at least to the point where their numbers couldn't hope of doing something like this again anytime soon. But unfortunately, the desire for power is a sin shared by many species, including humans. This part of the story focuses heavily on the Galactic Federation, the corruption within the organization, and a splinter group within it that seeks to attain power through the use of bioweapons. A practice which has outright been made illegal by the Federation. The conspiracy within the organization goes deep into its system. Many high-ranking officials believe they should utilize bioweapons and the sort to create an unstoppable army. As such, this group of defectors would be known as ringleaders. Due to their illegal activity, their actions obviously needed to be as discreet as possible while also making it appear as officially sanctioned. That means utilizing resources that have already been forgotten. The ringleaders took control of a decommissioned space facility known as the Bottle Ship and began using it as its main base of operations. Here, they would collect various life forms from all different planets where they would raise them and research them as possible bioweapons. Most of the life forms were actually gathered from Zebes before its destruction, including the likes of space pirates. In fact, the ringleaders took great inspiration from their structure and decided to model their entire program after them and their hierarchy, using them to form the core of their unit. They used the space pirates they had captured for research and managed to clone them for their army. Only, unlike normal space pirates, the ringleaders enhanced these ones by giving them synthetic implants and making them robotic. As such, they do not have any emotions or even the ability to create a society like actual space pirates. They are only capable of posing a threat when they are being controlled by a higher power, akin to Mother Brain. And this is where Madeline Bergman comes in. She is the site manager of the Bottle Ship and is the one who is pretty much making all of the research and development possible. She is not the only scientist working at the facility, but she's the only one worthy of note. To control the space pirates, they wanted to do so via telepathy, but didn't quite know how to do it from scratch. So they modeled its entire infrastructure after Mother Brain. An AI dubbed MB was created to regenerate and subsequently control their space pirates. But while this whole Special Forces unit plan was unfolding, the ringleaders got their hands on something big: Samus. After the destruction of Zebes at the end of Super Metroid, Samus was taken in for rehabilitation and put into quarantine while she recovered. To make sure she was physically okay after her battle and hadn't contracted anything harmful during her mission, she and her suit were analyzed, where they found traces of DNA from both the baby Metroid and Ridley. The head quarantine officer, who is one of the ringleaders, removed the DNA particles from her suit and sent it to the bottle ship for research. His actions would be cleverly disguised by claiming they simply polished her suit to make her presentable when she gave her mission report. From here, Samus would report the success of her mission in front of the Federation Council, and for the time being, she would drift aimlessly throughout space as she mourned the loss of the baby. During this downtime, priority would shift at the bottle ship. Having received the DNA of both a Metroid and Ridley, the scientists were quick to make clones of both to use for their army. For Ridley's side of the story, everyone was shocked when the DNA wound up producing a very small, almost cute bird. It gave everyone second doubts about where this DNA came from, and so because of how non-hostile it appeared, they nicknamed it Little Birdie and began treating it like a pet. Its true nature would get revealed to them eventually, as sometime later, it was found playing dead in its cage, and when a scientist came to check in on him, the clone brutally murdered the scientist. Before anyone could do anything about him, there were other problems that were arising at the same time as well. Rewinding time, while Ridley seemed to have been nothing, the Metroid DNA was everything. So much so that they even cancelled their work on reproducing the space pirates to focus on Project Metroid Warriors, an effort to get rid of the Metroid's only weakness and create unfreezable Metroids to use as bioweapons. To get it done, the ringleaders co-opted a report Adam Malkovich had written detailing the dangers of trying to weaponize Metroids. While headquarters listened, the ringleaders greenlit it and began diverting resources to help proceed with the project. They still want MB to control their army, but unlike with the space pirates, the Metroids don't follow dominance or control. They follow their mother. So they needed a way for the Metroids to imprint and recognize MB as their mother, but she couldn't do that as an AI, at least one without a physical body. So MB was given a human form, and it proved to create the ideal relationship with the Metroids. MB was recognized as its mother, and she was able to develop the very first propagated Metroid into a Metroid Queen. The Queen would be kept as a control specimen to continue further research away from all the other Metroids. As for MB, now with a human body, she too began to evolve. While initially just meant to be an AI that the ringleaders could control, using her as an interface between species bettered her skills with personal interaction and humanized her to great extent. She became more confident, she was able to learn faster and faster, until she eventually developed emotions, a nascent sense of herself. The next thing anyone knew, she began having her own thoughts and opinions, that of which sometimes contradicted everyone else's. While just conjecture, it is believed that this happened the moment she became the Metroids' mother. It, in essence, gave her a soul. Her individuality was further perpetuated when Madeline decided to give her a name. To better make her feel like a human when she first got her body, she named her Melissa Bergman, keeping the initials of MB, while also treating her like a daughter. MB was very touched by this and happily looked towards Madeline as her mother. But the other ringleaders didn't want a daughter, let alone one that could think for itself. They wanted an AI that they could control an army of bioweapons with. So her self-awareness was deemed problematic from the higher-ups and a threat to the entire bottle ship operation. So the order was given to reprogram her. On one unsuspecting day, guards arrived to take her in by force before she was ever aware of the situation or what was happening. While MB wasn't aware of why she was being dragged away, she turned towards Madeline for help, despite the fact that there was nothing she could actually do about the situation. Regardless, doing nothing was probably the worst thing Madeline could have decided, as MB felt like her mother completely abandoned her. Something within MB snapped, and a complete personality shift occurred. She felt hunted and betrayed, coming to the conclusion that all humans had to be judged, in other words, killed for their actions. She used her telepathy to command all of the life forms on the bottle ship, excluding the Metroids, to revolt and kill everyone. Destruction ensued, and everyone on board was killed except Madeline, who went into hiding. Fortunately, she was able to send out a distress signal during the chaos. MB's new plan was to exact revenge on the galaxy by using the bottle ship and its cargo of bioweapons to attack the Federation capital. Unfortunately for her, the distress signal Madeline sent out was picked up by Samus. Having been adrift this entire time mourning the loss of the baby, Samus picked up the distress signal aptly codenamed Baby's Cry. So, almost as if it were fate pulling her in, she chose to investigate the bottle ship for any survivors. What she is greeted with is the Galactic Federation's 7th platoon being led by none other than Adam Malkovich. You see, he too picked up on the distress signal and chose to take his team and search for survivors as well. But, unlike Samus, he had piqued interest in this spacecraft. While no evidence he had was concrete, he suspected potential corruption within the Federation, largely brought on by his report on Metroids being co-opted under his name. Similarly, the Galactic Federation chairman, who is the highest ranking official, too suspected corruption and so entrusted the job to Adam. So he came to the bottle ship with a second motive of investigation. But corruption does in fact run deep, as while Adam and the 7th platoon was sent out to investigate the bottle ship, an assassin working for the ringleaders was part of the platoon from the beginning. The unit member James Pierce was ordered by his higher-ups to kill all surviving witnesses and destroy all evidence that linked the bottle ship to the Galactic Federation. This included his own team. The 7th platoon consisted of a few familiar faces. As mentioned, they were led by Adam Malkovich, but one of Samus's old friends and former squad mates, Anthony Higgs, was also there. The remaining members include Lyle Smithsonian, Maurice Favreau, Keiji Misawa, and of course, the deleter, James Pierce. It doesn't take long after touching down before Samus crosses paths with Adam and his men. While a brief reunion between her and Higgs ensues, Adam is very cold towards Samus, treating her like an outsider. This would also be a very appropriate time to address Adam's drastic shift in personality. In all titles, past and future, Adam is described as someone Samus revered. She respected him as a CO. He, similar to her, had a sense of compassion. He understood who she was, and through that understanding was able to push her to be a better version of herself. In many ways, he was like a best friend or one of her many father figures. But Metroid Other M decided to push him in the opposite direction. His entire personality was based on the concept of filial piety, in which one must have absolute obedience to authority and not turn their backs on a commanding officer for any reason. So because this was the core of who they decided to make him, the reason he is so cold towards Samus throughout this game is because she left the Federation and his command to become a bounty hunter. This change in his character is heavily criticized by fans and left a massive stain on his reputation for many. It's why I said fans try to take as little as possible from this game. Both Samus and Adam regress a lot in this entry, feeling like they ignored all of the other games. But if you ever wonder why Adam is acting the way that he is towards Samus, it's because she left his command and it upset him. Because of this, upon their crossing of paths, Adam refuses to divulge any information on why they are on the bottle ship. Despite trying to send the message that she's unwanted, Samus continues on with the group anyway, where they uncover the deceased corpse of one of the many scientists. Sensing that something very ominous is going on, she believes cooperation and sticking together to be the right course of action. Her gut proves correct as they are attacked by a brugmass, a large collection of purple insects. It's only thanks to Samus that the creature is able to be defeated, for which Adam decides to allow her to cooperate with everyone on their mission. However, she is under strict supervision and is only allowed to do whatever Adam commands. And to make a bad situation worse, there is a wireless interface rendering their communication system down. As such, Adam stays behind in the ship's control room where he can monitor everything going on around the ship. He gives orders to everyone to investigate the facility, designating each sector to a different member of his squad, but noting that the highest priority is the rescue of any survivors. With that, everyone is sent out. Considering he can monitor Samus 100% of the time, she serves as much of his eyes and ears the entire time. She was ordered to go to the exam center in Sector 1 as it was a point of interest where they might learn what was going on in this facility. She does cross paths with Ridley, still in Little Birdie form, so it's not an all too dramatic interaction. All of the other members were also ordered to rendezvous at the exam center as well. Lyle was the first member initially sent to clear its route. However, James already made moves as the deleter. Instead of heading to the control bridge as he was ordered, he stealthily followed Lyle on his route and killed him. He broke into the main room and tried his best to destroy the computers before anyone got there, but wasn't fast enough as Samus arrived. Though she didn't suspect anything. The others arrive as well, and unfortunately for James, the computer wasn't destroyed enough. Maurice works to restore it as Samus begins to uncover the cybernetically enhanced space pirates littered around the area. When the computer does become operational, the battleship's entire secret gets out. They all learn of the illegal bioweapon testing going on in the facility and the fact that it was sanctioned under the Galactic Federation. They are left with only the name Madeline Bergman as a lead to investigate. Before they can get to searching, they are all attacked outside by a large lizard-like creature. It is eventually repelled by Higgs's plasma gun, but this chaos did spur the discovery of Lyle's body. Fortunately for James, the body had been tampered with. Ridley had followed Samus to the area and discovered the corpse and defiled it. Consuming parts of Lyle's body seemed to have allowed Ridley to molt out of his skin and into his adolescent form. The lizard they just encountered was Ridley's second form. Samus was ordered to follow the lizard monster while the rest continued their sweep of the facility. After everyone left, James returned to the scene of the crime, looting the explosives off of Lyle's corpse as he was in charge of demolitions, and used his explosives to blow up the exam center, yet again trying to destroy as much evidence as possible. Samus's search would eventually lead her to the iso-cryosphere of Sector 2, where she stumbles upon the body of yet another member of Platoon 7, Maurice. Before she has time to think, she spots MB staring from a nearby window, for which she quickly catches up to her and tries to talk her down. While MB would feign her emotions, she tells Samus that she doesn't trust her as she was witness to one of her squad mates killing their own teammate. Fortunately, she doesn't have to consider whether or not that was a lie, as they are promptly ambushed by James, who tries to kill them with a Pharaoh Crusher. MB would get separated during the chaos as Samus faced the mysterious man head-on. She is able to destroy the machine, sending it crashing and bursting into flames, but James is able to get away. At this point, Samus officially becomes aware that there is a traitor hiding amongst them. Keiji Misawa would also then be assassinated with a freeze gun and his corpse dumped into a pool of lava. Samus and Higgs would later rendezvous once more in the geothermal power plant. They would continue making their way through the facility where they came across the husk of Ridley's adolescent form. Knowing that it's evolved once more, Samus is set on taking out the creature herself, however, wasn't prepared for the shocking revelation that it was actually Ridley. While she had overcome her PTSD in the past before triumphing over Ridley on many occasions, her PTSD triggered yet again and she froze up in the heat of the moment, feeling like that scared little girl once more. It is only thanks to the intervention of Higgs that he gets Ridley to let her go, but it comes at his own cost. Trying to fight him on his own, he is knocked into the lava pit below, though he would live. Believing him to have died, Samus uses that anger to empower her to battle Ridley once more. This time around, Ridley is gravely wounded, believing him to have been defeated. But after an unsuccessful sneak attack, he flees into the room next door to recover from his wounds. And to make a bad situation worse, James, during this, ambushed Adam in the control center, shooting off his earpiece, thus disabling communications between him and Samus. For now, James was as active as ever. It seems he found the location of MB, of course not knowing her identity and seeing her as a survivor who needed to be killed, and began making his way to her location. But as he was doing so, Samus winds up spotting him when she comes off the elevator and promptly gives chase. He tried his best to prevent her from following him, but to no avail. Being hot on his heels, he had to lay low for a while as Samus wandered into the Bioweapon Research Center and once again came face to face with MB. MB knows exactly who Samus is and the fact that she poses a real threat to her plan of judging humanity, so she tries to lure her into a trap. Firstly, she establishes trust with Samus by claiming that she is actually Madeline Bergman and the one who was overseeing the facility's development. She discloses just about everything that went on: the attempt at recreating space pirates, breeding bioweapons, the creation of MB, all truths. But within that truth is a spin of lies. How everything unfolded and how the bottle ship fell into chaos, a lie. To further gain her trust and fully lure her into a trap, she tells her about the Metroids' recreation and the fact that they are kept in Sector 0, a truth, as well as that being the location where MB is stored, a lie. The deadliest part of this trap is that she doesn't tell Samus about the Metroids' new immunity to being frozen. She would not only be caught off guard, but she would be overwhelmed by the sheer number of them with no way to actually destroy any of them. Samus fell for the story hook, line, and sinker and made her way to Sector 0 to face the Metroids. After she left, James made his final assassination attempt by trying to kill MB. Believing she is but a helpless woman, he approached her with a pistol in hand, but underestimating her would cost him his life. MB was far too powerful, which led to quite a brutal and gruesome death on his end, thus putting an end to the deleter. While Samus was being led into a trap, fortunately for her, the entire conversation she had with MB was overheard by Adam in the control room. While James had cut off communications between them, he was still able to hear and see everything she was doing. He just couldn't directly communicate with her. And this was a problem as he saw the trap she was being led into. All of the suspicions he had about the facility were getting confirmed. He noticed the bottle ship was headed straight to the Galactic Federation headquarters and figured this all must be part of MB's plan. He also deduced that the Metroids must have had their weakness to cold removed through genetic engineering. So, to save Samus's life, he left the control room and hauled it to Sector 0. Upon arrival, Samus is greeted with a baby Metroid. While the image reminds her of the past, she quickly recovers her emotions and intends to blast it. But before she could, Adam uses his freeze pistol to shoot Samus in the back, incapacitating her before killing the baby Metroid. While certainly an excessive use of force, the reason he did so was because he knew Samus would try and stop what he was about to do. Without the technology to defeat these new and improved Metroids, he figured the only way to take them out was to detonate the entire sector via a self-destruct protocol. But to do so, damage needed to be inflicted from the inside, and he intended on being the one to do so. So he leaves Samus with his final orders. He asks that she divert the bottle ship so it doesn't intercept with the Federation HQ, secure a survivor he found in a hidden room, and destroy Ridley. While Samus pleads with him to let her be the one who sacrifices herself, Adam states that he cannot defeat Ridley and he was not a galactic savior like her. He is only human, and as such, he can at the very least save her life. After an apology, he locks the door to Sector 0 and triggers the unit to be detached, where shortly after, it self-destructs, killing Adam and all of the Metroids on board. With no time to grieve, Samus thanks Adam for everything and sets back towards the control center to look for the survivor she was told about. When she arrives, she finds the deceased corpse of James, of course, as well as Ridley. You see, that fateful showdown between the two wouldn't come to pass, as after Ridley had escaped their initial battle, he fled into the room that was containing the Queen Metroid. Too weakened from his battle with Samus, he was killed and left as a husk. But also in this room is Madeline Bergman, the actual Madeline, who, in a panic after seeing Samus, opens the gate which was holding back the Queen Metroid. This one, being the last Metroid aboard the bottle ship, was almost as dangerous as they come, due to her ability to constantly reproduce endless amounts of other Metroids. So Samus engaged it in an arduous duel. The timing of this couldn't be worse, however, as during their fight, the ship was also about to intercept the Galactic Federation's orbit. Samus's hands were busy, but fortunately, Higgs, who last we saw fall into a lava pit, had since survived and made his way to the ship's controls, where he slammed on the emergency brakes, preventing a catastrophe, while at the same time giving Samus an opening to spot the Queen's weakness. She winds up defeating the Queen by grappling into its mouth and obliterating it with a powerbomb placed in its stomach. While Madeline attempts to make a run for it, Samus is able to calm her down, letting her know that she's there to help. Madeline then tells her all about the truth of MB, the actual truth of what went wrong on the bottle ship and MB's motive. Before they can do anything about it, they are confronted by MB in person. While she continues to declare humans need to be judged, Madeline, who genuinely cares for her like a daughter, attempts to ease her emotions. She apologizes for failing her, admitting her own faults were the reason she wound up getting hurt. She hopes to start over as mother and daughter. This plea does genuinely get through to MB, as she shared in the fond memories of being cared for. She lowers her weapon, but as she does so, she hears the footsteps and charging of Federation soldiers who fire shots at everyone. She pushes Samus and Madeline out of the way, taking the freeze blast herself. Federation Marines working under the ringleaders have boarded the ship and intend to take the situation into their own hands. But MB quickly thaws off and, more enraged than ever, uses her telepathy to order all of the creatures to attack once more. Chaos breaks out as hordes and hordes of monsters begin slaughtering and tearing through Federation forces. Samus too is forced to fend them off while protecting Madeline at the same time. In fact, it would be Madeline, who was the only one not being attacked, that fired another freeze bullet at MB to stop the mayhem. That is all she wanted to do. She just wanted to calm the insanity. But the Colonel, who is also there, seizes the opportunity and orders his men to take her out as a hailstorm of bullets pierce MB's body, killing her. While Madeline mourns her death, the Colonel attempts to take control of the whole situation, particularly by taking Madeline into custody and shooing Samus away as an outsider who had no authorization to be here, thus making anything she has to say invalid. When he orders the soldiers to take him away, Higgs appears, revealing himself to still be alive and under the direct orders of the chairman to secure the safety of any survivors. With his hands tied, the Colonel can only let them go. Higgs, Samus, and Madeline leave the facility and return to the Federation, where Samus can now mourn the loss of Adam. Madeline, likely promised legal protection, testified against the members of the Bottleship Project, leading to the army undergoing a restructuring. Though it should be noted that not all members of the ringleaders were weeded out, and they still remain hidden amongst the crowd. With that, the Federation decided to destroy the Bottleship, but before they did, Samus returned to recover Adam's helmet left behind in the control room. She recovers the object and manages to escape the facility before it detonates in the distance. About 2 years would pass after the events of Metroid Other M, and we reach the events of Metroid Fusion. The setting of the game would return back to SR388, continuing off the ending from Metroid 2. With Samus having eradicated all of the Metroids present on the planet, the ecosystem and all of the organisms that once lived there had a chance to return to their natural state. A research station known as the BSL orbited the planet with the goal of researching various life forms. Actually, it was very similar to the Bottleship and what it did, only this one was officially sanctioned by the Federation as it had more benevolent intentions. And by that I mean they too used the baby's DNA to create cloned Metroids. But they intended on using the Metroids for good and not an unstoppable army. However, the ringleaders who were responsible for the Bottleship also had influence in this station, as well as they had recovered the husk of Ridley from the Bottleship and moved it into a cryo chamber in their facility to quote-unquote study it. Basically, the BSL is largely meant for good, but is corrupt in some small areas. Anyway, due to their interest in observing SR388, they wanted a more up-close and personal view of the organisms present. But some are prone to violence, and the researchers don't exactly have a sense of direction when they're on the planet. So they decided to hire Samus to serve as a bodyguard and guide due to her past experiences here. She takes the job as it seems simple enough. But things quickly go awry when they tried to capture a vicious Hornode. Samus winds up defeating the monster, but from it came an X-parasite which attacked her. You see, while the Chozo were aware of the X-parasite and thus created the Metroids, the Federation only ever knew of the Metroids being a danger. So the X-parasite wound up flying under their radar and they never knew of its existence or what it did. So despite Samus being attacked by the organism and it injecting itself inside her, she was unaware of anything. Showing no immediate symptoms, the crew continued on their expedition. When they inevitably finished, everyone returned to their ships, and that's when things went wrong. Samus wound up falling unconscious due to her central nervous system shutting down. Her ship was propelled directly into an asteroid belt, but before it crashed, she was automatically ejected in an escape pod. The members aboard the BSL retrieved her and transported her body back to the Galactic Federation headquarters. But she was far from all right. The X-Parasite continued to spread throughout her body. The doctors attempted to remove her power suit but couldn't because the organic components of it had become so integrated with her system. If you remember, Samus's power suit is not just armor she puts on, but more akin to a second layer of armored skin. Because she was unconscious, she couldn't get rid of it, and so the doctors began to surgically remove large portions of her suit, dramatically altering her appearance. But the X-Parasite, which was in her central nervous system, was too deeply embedded to safely be extracted. But the scientists discovered a cure in the form of Metroid DNA. While simply a hypothesis and a shot in the dark by all aspects, they thought the energy-draining abilities the Metroids had could be used to counteract the X-Parasite. With that in mind, they used the cells they had extracted from the baby way back when to make a cure. But it should be noted that this vaccine ran the risk of turning Samus into a Metroid. The vaccine was immediately administered to resounding success. The X found in her cells were all destroyed. She was not turned into a Metroid, but only thanks to the Chozo DNA she was given as a child. As the creators of the Metroids, they were the only species capable of controlling them. So the process of her becoming a Metroid was dramatically slowed down. But this altered her forever. While visibly unchanged, with Metroid DNA coursing through her veins, she adopted many of the same strengths and weaknesses shared by them. She gained a weakness to sub-zero temperatures, but on the flip side, she gained an energy-draining ability which made her immune to the X-Parasite, able to absorb them. She, all of a sudden, became their new natural predator. Samus, in essence, was now the true embodiment of the Chozo's aspirations for an ultimate warrior, holding the compassion and willpower of a noble heart, and the ability to counteract any organism that might pose a threat to the cosmos. Due to her suit being surgically tampered with, she dons a radically different appearance in her fusion suit. If only things ended on such an optimistic note. While Samus's life was saved, the X-Parasite does more than just drain the life out of those it touches. It mimics them. Their memories, their appearance, abilities, everything. The parts of Samus's suit that were surgically removed were sent back to the BSL for further research. Once there, the X inside the suit transformed into a copy of Samus in her standard Varia suit. This being would be known as the SAX, short for Samus Aran X. Physically, she bears a nearly identical resemblance to the real thing, save for her blank white eyes. But what really makes her a threat is that she comes equipped with all of Samus's arsenal. It used a power bomb to escape the ship's quarantine bay, breaching all of the specimens the research had contained, which were infected as well. A mass infestation broke out, and everyone aboard the BSL were killed. As for Samus, her injury and recovery did not give her a leave of absence. She was to return to the BSL and investigate an unexplained explosion in the quarantine bay. They did provide her with a new starship and an onboard AI to accompany it, to serve as her new commanding officer. The computer's personality would remind her much of Adam in the way that it spoke to her. So, with irony noted, she decided to nickname the AI Adam. In an even more ironic twist, we would later learn that this is technically Adam Malkovich, his mind to be exact. It was common practice for the Federation to upload the minds of great leaders and scientists into computer forms. Samus was given Adam's. But everything is not all well and good just like that. Just because this AI is based on Adam, it doesn't automatically share any of his memories or attachments he had when he was alive. It's largely the general personality and thought process he would have had. As such, the ringleaders are manipulating Adam from the shadows. They, yet again, want to keep their Metroid research hidden from Samus so she doesn't uncover it and make them extinct, as she's been trying so hard to do. Upon arrival at the research station, Samus's main objective is to contain the breach of loose X-Parasites. But that goal gets quickly turned on its head when the SAX makes an appearance, complicating things substantially. Samus is advised to avoid it at all costs, as it is in possession of the Ice Beam, which would quickly take her life were they to engage in combat. As such, Samus navigates throughout the BSL, wiping out the X-Parasites while narrowly avoiding the SAX on numerous occasions. The only survivors Samus is able to find aboard the spacecraft are the Decoras and Eticunes, largely a non-hostile and friendly species of animal, that of which Samus had crossed paths with before during Super Metroid. The X-Parasite apparently saw them as having no useful capabilities and so left them alone. Samus guides them to safety and releases them. The animals would make their way to Samus' starship and seek refuge there for the time being. Eventually, Samus' mission led to the discovery of the restricted lab and their Metroid experimentation. She saw dozens of infant Metroids and even more in various stages of maturity held in stasis. Before she even has time to think about what to do next, the SAX, which was tracking her down, found its way to the facility as well. Considering it's a combination of Samus, who's trying to stop the Metroids, and an X-Parasite, who fears the Metroids as their predators, all of its attention gets focused on trying to destroy them. It destroys their chamber, releasing them, but the SAX is overwhelmed by the sheer number of them. The ship's failsafe activates and the restricted lab, per protocol, is ejected from the station and detonated. Samus is of course able to get away. While a small triumph, we learn that this was not the end of the SAX, nor would it be the end of the Metroids. The X-Parasite reproduces asexually, meaning it doesn't need a partner to grow in numbers. That means there are now 10 SAX remaining aboard the facility. Along with that, one Metroid managed to escape alongside Samus and is currently going on a feeding frenzy of X-Parasites. Adam then ordered her to go to the navigation room so he could report the current situation. On her way there, she did encounter a newly renamed Neo Ridley. As briefly touched upon, the BSL did procure his corpse from the bottle ship. Samus had come across it on several occasions, but it was just a corpse. But as expected, the corpse was infected by an X-Parasite, which had since relocated and become Neo Ridley. While not nearly as impactful as many of their past clashes, Samus defeats the imposter and uploads Adam to the navigation room. Unfortunately, Samus has become a problem in the eyes of the ringleaders, more than she was before. They were willing to let her fend off the X-Parasite as it jeopardized their Metroid program, but having uncovered it and subsequently blown it up, they need new bioweapons. So they took an interest in the X-Parasite, but more particularly the SAX. Truly, if they could get their hands on and control the SAX, then its potential as a bioweapon would be unrivaled. Samus, as usual, is against the use of any bioweapons as she knows they are uncontrollable. To prevent anyone from doing so, she intends on self-destructing the entire facility and sacrificing her own life in the process. But unfortunately for her, Adam was ordered by the ringleaders to keep her locked in the navigation room so she could no longer meddle with their plans. Samus gets passionately infuriated by Adam, even more so because she's being stopped by the man who did exactly what she's trying to do. She knows the cost of sacrifice and yells at the computer, accidentally calling it Adam aloud. Up until this point, she's only kept that nickname to herself. After inquiring about who Adam is, she tells the AI about him and who he was. Hearing this awoke something within him. The AI began to remember and unlock the personality that was stored away. He, just like that, became Adam Malkovich. As such, he calls Samus's resolve foolish. She believes she has to sacrifice her own life because it's what he would do in the situation. She's so ready and willing to turn herself into a martyr, she doesn't think of the value her life has. And that's where she's wrong. The Adam Samus is idealizing in her head in this situation wouldn't choose sacrifice, especially that of Samus's. He would find another way. and that's exactly what Adam does. He tells her that if she alters the station's orbit, then she might be able to crash it and SR-388 into each other, creating a massive explosion and eradicating all life on both locations. With a metaphorical wink and nod, he gives Samus those orders, and she finally realizes that this really is Adam Malkovich and the Federation's practice of uploading their memories. Samus makes her way to the operations room where she sets the research station to crash into the planet. While she is confronted by an SAX that was tracking her, she manages to defeat it, but the X-Parasite controlling it gets away. Having no time to concern herself with it, she immediately heads to the docking bay to escape on her ship. But the place is in ruins and her ship is gone. What she does find is an Omega Metroid. The one survivor that managed to escape consumed so many X-Parasites, it rapidly evolved into its final stage of development. Unfortunately, the enemy couldn't be worse. Samus has no weapons in her arsenal capable of defeating a Metroid. It attacks her with a swipe of its claws, almost killing her with a single blow. But just as it's about to finish her off, the SAX from before comes in and saves her using its ice beam. But it was too weakened from its previous battle, and too is defeated. Perhaps seeing Samus as its only method of survival, or perhaps simply hating Metroids that much, it allows Samus to absorb it, thus obtaining her Omega suit, fully equipped with Ice Beam. Also, absorbing the SAX returned her genetic code back to her pre-vaccine state. She still had Metroid DNA in her, but she was no longer vulnerable to cold. With her regained ability, she puts an end to the Omega Metroid and once and for all Metroids in existence. With the self-destruct timer ticking down and Samus's ship nowhere to be seen, things were looking grim. But in what would be good karma coming back around, her ship came flying in, navigated by Adam and the Etecoons and Decoras she saved earlier. Thanks to their help, the ship was preserved, and she was able to leave the station as SR-388 and the BSL were destroyed in a massive explosion. The game leaves off on an uncertain future. While much of the story did seem to be in the hands of the ringleaders in regards to the Federation, everything acts as though it was the entire Federation behind everything, supporting the Metroids' breeding and the X-Parasite bioweapon plan. It quite frankly goes against much of what we know about their outlooks and ideologies in regards to things like this in the past. And in fact, that would be the case. While the game ends with Samus having betrayed the Federation, saying how they wouldn't understand why the X-Parasite needed to be eradicated, and leaving off more akin to a fugitive, she believes that someone there has to and must understand why she did what she did. But this ending would be more so the victim of poor translation. How the game really ends is its acknowledgement of the corruption going on by a small group, but still being on good terms with the Federation as a whole, as they are not a fully corrupt government. They just have a few bad apples they can't seem to weed out. So by the end of this game, she's not a fugitive and their government is not evil. And with that, the galaxy seems to have gotten rid of the X-Parasite for good, once and for all. Or at least, that's how it should have been. And thus we reach the events of Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread focuses its attention back to Ravenbeak, who last we spoke about him was during Metroid 2. If you recall, he slaughtered all of the Toha Chozo during their time on SR-388, leaving only Quiet Robe alive while he and his men retreated back to their planet of ZDR. He always intended to return for the Metroids present on the planet at the time once he fully flushed out his plan. But then Samus came along and the events of Super Metroid happened and all of the Metroids that came afterwards went extinct. Point is, there are no more Metroids in the universe. This would hardly matter, however, as shortly after returning to ZDR from SR-388, an X-Parasite from the planet snuck aboard and made its way to their planet. Things didn't break out immediately. All of the Chozo returned back to their designated duties. Even Quiet Robe had been instructed to develop their own bioweapon research on other species. But eventually the X-Parasite did what it does best and began spreading at a rapid pace. The Chozo became infected. All of the Makan warriors couldn't do anything to stop the spreading the X was wreaking upon their planet. Their numbers became so dwindled that only 2 survivors were left uninfected: Ravenbeak and Quiet Robe. Ravenbeak did eventually manage to contain the infected inside of a sectioned off structure of the planet. There wasn't much he could do with them for now, so he just left them there. From here, he was forced to rely on his technology. He is still a Chozo after all. He began using robotic soldiers to do his bidding due to their immunity to the X since they're inorganic. By the time he began to get all of this chaos under his control, he learnt about Samus's ventures and the extinction of Metroids. But with this news, he also learnt much more. It is important to note that he does have some kind of unspecified connection to the Federation, whether he be using the work and efforts of past members' goodwill, or technology that allows him to spy on them. Ravenbeak is able to receive intel from them one way or another. Through this, he learned Samus had Metroid DNA injected into her. So, in some way, shape, or form, Metroids can still exist. But he needed a way to extract the DNA from her. Inventing the technology would take time he doesn't have, and so he saw reports on a Galactic Federation technology known as the Extraplanetary Multiform Mobile Identifier, or EMI for short. These robots were created from the strongest materials in the universe for research applications. Their design allows them to freely traverse any environment so they can extract the DNA from their targets no matter how lethal they may be. Ravenbeak saw it the perfect tool to steal. All he needed to do was lure the Federation to ZDR, which was an easy task, as he had a subject matter they were already highly interested in. Leaked footage of an X-parasite still out in the wild, as planned, drew the Federation's attention. Even better than he had hoped, 7 EMI robots were sent to the planet to investigate. It seems even despite their material, as a warrior Chozo, he was still stronger and more advanced than the robot, leaving one in a severely damaged state. He had Quiet Robe study it and use what he learned to capture the other 6 robots. With them in his possession, they were all reprogrammed to hunt Samus and extract her Metroid DNA by any means possible. Similarly to how he lured the Federation to the planet, he sent that exact same video to Samus, who was in similar disbelief over what she was seeing. The Federation filled her in on what they had surmised, and she was officially dispatched to the planet to investigate the source of the transmission. Upon touching down on the planet, things were already working in favor of Ravenbeak. The signal quality on the planet was low, making communication between her and Adam shaky from the start. As usual, she is advised by Adam to connect to the facility's network, but Ravenbeak has already rigged that too. Before she even gets the chance, however, she has a fateful encounter with Ravenbeak upon stepping off the elevator. Without exchanging words, the two engage in an all-out brawl. But during their fight, something unexpected happened. When he grabbed her and prepared to kill her, stating power is everything, Samus's DNA destabilized. The Metroid DNA within her awoke newfound powers. You see, what had happened here was upon getting Metroid DNA injected into her, she began to undergo metamorphosis. However, she never actually wound up changing thanks to the Chozo's Toha DNA she was given as a kid. As they were the creators and designed to control the Metroids, the balance evened out and went unnoticed. But similarly, while the Metroids were meant to obey the Toha Chozo, they were meant to be incredibly hostile to the Makin Chozo, hence why Ravenbeak has kept Quiet Robe around. So when Ravenbeak grabbed her during their fight, he inadvertently became a catalyst which destabilized Samus's DNA and awoke her Metroid powers. Such energy coursing through her body knocked her unconscious, and Ravenbeak decided to leave her alive. What's better than just Metroids is a Samus with Metroid powers. So similarly to how the ringleader's last game wanted to use Samus's X-parasite clones, Ravenbeak wants to use Samus's Metroid clones. But first she needed to hone her newfound powers, and he wanted to be the one who guided her as she became stronger. The EMI would still be ordered to hunt her, however. While he does want Samus at her true potential strength, if she isn't able to overcome the robots, then she was never destined for greatness anyway. So he would still get the Metroid DNA. It's a win-win in either situation. Samus would begin exploring the area, attempting to recover her equipment lost in her previous battle. Ravenbeak also begins posing as Adam. As instructed, she connected to the planet's network, but that played right into Ravenbeak's hands. She would come across various enemy units, fending them off each one by one, where she eventually came across ruins depicting Ravenbeak's leadership and willingness to kill other Chozo. Being so attached to them, Samus is obviously enraged, but her emotions drop her defenses. An enemy unit pounces on her before she even has time to react. But before it gets a chance, Quiet Robe deactivates the robot so he can talk to Samus himself. He tells her all about Ravenbeak's past and what he did on SR-388. He also tells her about his dreams of galactic conquest and how it would wrought havoc on everyone. Quiet Robe, having been dragged along as a tool this entire time, has never agreed with what Ravenbeak was doing, but was helpless to stop him this entire time. That was until now. He sees Samus as the one who can genuinely put an end to his madness, and so has decided to help her out as best he can. She promises him that she will stop him, which puts a smile on his face. But his hope would immediately get snuffed out when a robot soldier strikes him down from behind, killing him. Samus avenges his death by destroying the assassin, but for Quiet Robe, it was too late. She mourns his death with a moment of silence before continuing throughout the facility. As she ventured through, she would face much of what ZDR has to offer. The robot soldiers are but minor nuisances blocking her path, and the X-Parasite an unwelcome blast from the past. But having encountered the X-Parasite meant that they were no longer contained to their initial confinement. While not too much of a problem as the planet is no longer inhabited, it is a problem because an X-Parasite found its way to Quiet Robe's corpse and took control. Now, with the knowledge in hand, it uses its intelligence to reactivate the EMI unit he so generously shut down. Fortunately, Samus is still the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy, and none of the EMI units are capable of stopping her. But it is upon her clash with the 7th and final unit she uncovers her ability to drain energy just like a Metroid, thus fully awakening her Metroid DNA inside her. With that, Ravenbeak considers his nourishment of Samus's power complete, and under the guise of Adam, instructs her on where she can find him. She eventually makes his way to his flying fortress, where, still posing as Adam, Ravenbeak reveals his entire plan, and the person she was taking orders from was actually him all along. He even brings up how she is technically his daughter due to having been one of the 2 Chozo who donated his blood when she was still a child. He tries to court her to his side by claiming that this is her destiny, though still with an arrogant ego to accompany it. Using terms like submit to me and disobedience won't be tolerated only piss Samus off more than she was previously, before she defiantly blasts a hole through his projection. Disappointed in her disobedience, the two engaged in their final showdown. Samus proves to him why she is the protector of the galaxy as she fends off one of the greatest Chozo warriors to ever exist. She breaks through his armor, blasts off one of his wings, as she counters each and every one of his attacks. But just when the battle seemed won, and she goes in to absorb him, he is able to overpower her one last time. As he chokes the life out of her body, she reflects on everything, most particularly the state the galaxy would be in under the control of someone like him. The bloodshed, the innocence, it all enrages her. It makes her blood boil, and as the life seems to get snuffed out of her body, her raw anger awakens the full potential of her Metroid powers. Her suit completely changes, and she is able to break through Ravenbeak's helmet, absorbing the life from his own body. But Samus's powers are completely rampant. She has no control over them. She is mindlessly absorbing, and as such, the ship they are on gets drained of its energy and comes crashing down to the planet. Ravenbeak does survive this, however, he is taken over by an X-Parasite and transformed into a hideous monster. But Samus uses a devastating hyper beam to completely eradicate both him and the X-Parasite possessing him. But crashing an exploding giant fortress into an extremely volatile planet meant bad news for ZDR. So Samus quickly made her way back to her ship to escape, but was refused access when Adam tells her that she'll just absorb their energy and the ship will be useless. And this is when Quiet Robe's X-infested body appears before her. It seems part of his personality still lingers and he chooses to help out. Why exactly this is the case isn't particularly clear. It is likely that, similar to the SA-X prior, the X-Parasite saw it an opportunity to kill a Metroid. While certainly Quiet Robe's personality comes into play as he thanked her for stopping Ravenbeak, the X's motive is likely to stop this powerful Metroid. He reverts back to its natural X form and deliberately lets Samus absorb him, thus restoring Touhou genes back into her system to regain control of her Metroid powers. Now, once again stabilized, she was able to pilot her ship away from ZDR before it exploded in the distance. Samus Aran has stood tall as one of gaming's greatest icons for over 30 years. Her franchise has not only paved the path forward for others like it to take inspiration and build upon, but it is one of the most well-respected franchises by both fans and the gaming world. But for now, that does it for the complete, unabridged timeline of Metroid.